Pardon former Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio announcing he's looking to run for the Senate in his state. Meanwhile, Cliven Bundy gets his case dismissed by a federal judge, say that 3 times fast, with prejudice, so there's a little into there. And oddly enough, adult film star Olivia Nova dead at the age of 20, bucking a trend of making it into the top 10, not bucking a trend of dead porn stars. We'll talk about that later on in the show. So what stories are the top for this week, as said on by you in your response in social media? We'll get to the top 10 and other things in just a moment here on This is the Conversation's weekly wrap-up show for the week ending January the 13th, 2018. And welcome to the podcast. My name is Jay Cleveland Payne. I am the host for this podcast, this show. This is the Conversations weekly wrap-up show, and we do it every single week as we wrap up the full week, like a little plus from Friday to Friday, with what's been going on in the news, things that kind of got lost in all of the, let's be honest, Trump stuff that happened this week. Although there's plenty of Trump stuff in the news, and some of the later stuff we'll get to as well. But throughout the day, you watch the news, you tune in to get information, you get stuck in what's breaking, and that breaking basically stays there all day long. And we have a way to solve that. We come up with this podcast, which comes through by getting input from you all day long. We post links to stories on social media via Facebook and Twitter, and you respond to them, and we look at the numbers from there. You like, you love, you share, you hate, you comment, and we take a mashing of all our social media feeds, put them together, do some math in a spreadsheet because I don't do math, and it comes up with the top stories for the week. And that's what we do in the first half of this conversation here with you as we have our great conversations. We also have slated today an interview with a good friend of mine, a man I literally am looking at across the glass inside the studio as I do the first half of this program. His name is Kevin Miller. He is the morning anchor for First News with Kevin Miller, oddly enough, that's why they called it that, on KARN-FM in Little Rock, Arkansas, 102.9 KARN. It's a flagship, long-time station with a great following and a great heritage, and I'm very proud to know this guy, a very interesting and fun guy, and he's going to help me out doing some little work consulting. Basically, I'm going to put him through the ringer, and he's going to tell me how good or bad this whole thing is. So he will play the brackets and talk about him in just a bit. And then, of course, we'll get to all the other stories, or as many of them as we can on the back end that didn't get in the top 10. Of course, rounding out the top 15, talking about the most irrelevant story of the week, or almost irrelevant story of the week. 113, I believe, stories for this week. 116 stories total this week. So a lot of stories in for this week. And that's how this thing rolls. To get in on the conversation and make your vote count, just follow us on social media. Facebook, it's This is the Conversation. On Twitter, it's th_conversation. And, of course, go to our main website, thisistheconversation.com, for any other information that you need from us. So, without further ado, let's get into the stories for this week, the top 10 stories going on. Starting off with the number 10 story, and this is one where you can overcome stupidity and come out on the better end. This is coming from H&M, the clothier, who had to apologize after coming under fire under their, quote, coolest monkey in the jungle hoodie that they had modeled by a black child. Now, if you're not a black person and don't get the irrelevance of this, well, then let me school you really quick. Black people very often are compared to monkeys. And the reasoning is stupidity and racism. So, putting a hoodie on a kid who's black, sold on an international clothier, and saying that this is cool has a bit of a backlash. Now, let me do a little bit of apologizing for H&M very quickly, and it'll be a very little bit of apologizing. We know there's a very big trend of clothing overseas. In foreign places. Asia, for example, a lot of Asian countries love clothes that have English words on them. And they just take some things and translate them back and forth. And in translations, things get lost. So that happens often. That's why you very often will see pictures in some Asian country of a popular tea that has, curse words or something, some weird sentence that doesn't really make sense grammatically, because they just took something, translated it, and bam, came up with it. Or they literally pulled some words from someplace and went with that. That's why you have really weird things like that happening. This is probably what happened here, where they just took some sort of phrase and just threw it in there because, monkeys are cool in the jungle and everybody loves monkeys. So why not be the coolest monkey in the hoodie thing? And that didn't work out so well, especially since they just ironically or whatever put it on a black kid. This had a great response from social media. A lot of famous people tweeting their own versions of the hoodie, including greatest kid in the world, greatest king in the world. And in fact, the boy was offered a modeling contract with P. Diddy's modeling agency. So we'll see how that works out. But good news for the people of the world for figuring out that H&M are a bunch of dopes. The number 9 story for this week, the response jump is 2%, 2.02 to be exact. College football playoff, and that was Alabama rallying, coming back because they're such a poor and always hapless team to a overtime victory over Georgia, happening the Monday, 5 days from when I was recording this on this Friday. Now, Alabama and Georgia, 2 SEC powerhouses, they came out at the end, the number 3 and number 4 schools in the nation, which means top 4 make it in, and that's what happened. But Alabama and Georgia spent most of the year at number 1. In fact, Alabama, a little myth most of the time because normally they're number 1 and everybody else is chasing them. Georgia spent a lot of time above them until Georgia was beaten by Auburn. And then Alabama had the free reign. Then Alabama was beaten by Auburn. And then Georgia had a chance to re-beat Auburn again, or beat Auburn this time, to jump back in. And so that's how we got 2 SEC teams in the college football championships. They weren't facing each other in the semis, so they got a chance to win their games. And bam, the SEC guarantee came up this year. Now, whether you think there's a East Coast bias or SEC bias in the football championship, you're probably right. However, it just turned out that's the way it happens this year. We'll see if there are some changes to it. The fear is adding more teams and adding more divisions means the college football season goes on until February and, of course, gets in the way of the NFL playoffs. But we'll see how it goes. Plus, the bowl series, how the bowls work, are a benefit to all the schools out there because every school that basically gets a winning record gets to go on the road, have a great experience, and they all get paid. So that's how that's going to happen. We'll see if any changes come along in that vein anytime soon. I say probably not. Number 8 story this week, JFK Airport had a water leak that flooded the baggage claim area and forced evacuation of the airport. Now, number 1, there was a water leak at JFK during all the midst of the polar vortex, polar bomb stuff. So that was problem number 1. A water leak in one of the areas caused people to evacuate that terminal. It also leaked and flooded a baggage claim area that was underneath. In the cold, freezing temperatures, it froze a lot of stuff up, and that made for a lot of craziness because a lot of bags stuck down there in that claim were bags that were essentially misplaced or, I guess, dispersed due to a lot of the flights being delayed across the nation with the weather. So a lot of the bags weren't even supposed to necessarily be there. They should have been on someplace else. We'll see how this actually comes to fore in fixing anything forward. But another week, another weird thing happening in an airport this time, water leak busting up, flooding the baggage claim, and the freezing of the stuff. We'll see how much damage will actually be done. That gets a jump in response of almost 2%, 1.98%. The number 7 story gets an almost 2% jump as well, 1.94%, and that is Dennis Kucinich, who's back, not running for president again because you can't do that in 2018, but he is going to join the race for governor in Ohio. Now, what does that mean for all of us? Well, not really sure because I don't live in Ohio, but Ohio is a state that means a lot in the national stage. It's a very big state that means a lot for the early parts of the presidential races. So controlling that state and controlling the people, if you will mean a lot coming up in 2020. But for right now, Kucinich is joining a very crowded race for that governor's race. He is 71 years old, so like pretty much anyone else I'm thinking about, I'm probably not voting for him for how old he is. And there's 6 other prominent figures who are running for that seat, including some really big heavy hitters that's going to be taking over. Of course, this is going to take over for the term-limited John Kasich, who was a pretty popular guy. But he is obviously out of time with terms, so there's a whole bunch of folks shooting for more power. Kucinich, who famously ran for president a few times and famously tried to get married in the process, we'll see how governor works out for Mr. Kucinich. We're going to stay in the state of Ohio, oddly enough, for the number 6 story, and that's Ohio Republican Treasurer Josh Mandel dropping his Senate bid, citing his wife's health issues, 7.62% on that story, a jump for your responses. Now, Ohio State Treasurer John Mandel is a Republican. He's dropping out of his Senate bid due to his wife's health issues. He was a very prominent person and thought he would probably get a good chance of running. This was the seat that was held by Sherrod Brown, the Democrat, which would change this seat from blue to red. But he's ending it because of his wife's health issues, and he wants to think about his family and his children. So many things going on. He wants to basically focus on the family, and this is a real focus on the family type thing. He's going to serve out his term of treasurer, so he's going to keep working on that gig, but he's not going to take on the new gig, or at least try to take the new gig on with all the stresses of running for office and dealing with the issues that he has with the health of his wife. We go now to the number 5 story this week. Firefighters battle blaze at Trump Towers as smoke billows from top of skyscraper near President's penthouse. Whoever wrote that one really got their pay that day. 4.42% jump in response on that story for the week. The number 5 story deals with the story that happened in Trump Tower in Manhattan. I think it's in Manhattan, in New York. Yeah, the Manhattan Tower had smoke billowing from the roof that people saw for miles away. It's a 58-story building, and the firefighters that go up to the top end, of course, take care of the fire because where there's smoke, there's probably fire. A small fire started on top of the building. It wasn't anything really serious. It was essentially a heating unit or an air conditioning unit that malfunctioned and burnt on the top of the building. Nothing on the interior was really taken care of. Small electrical fire was basically what they said on the cooling tower of the roof. So it was taken care of in minutes. An incredible job. In fact, I will read Donald Trump's tweet. There was a small electrical fire in the cooling tower on the roof of Trump Tower. New York Fire Department was there within minutes and did an incredible job. That's exactly what we said. So it was pretty much simple, and no, Trump's building was not totally burning down. Number 4 story this week, immigration agents raid 7-Eleven stores nationwide, arrest 21 people in the biggest crackdown in the Trump era. This gets a jump in response, 1.69%. Now, we do know Trump has a problem with immigrants, and we'll maybe get to that a bit later as we talk about the extra stuff. But this isn't necessarily a isolated Trump thing, and 7-Eleven isn't necessarily being targeted on anything particular other than just what they do in the past. 7-Eleven has actually been targeted in the past for hiring non-documented workers, and that's something that's been done over and over for the past 20 years or so. This time, the massive amount of stores was just a sting that was set up with very little to do with Trump, if you will. 21 people arrested is a big number of folks, but it's the largest big bust, but it'd take dozens of stores to be raided at the same time for this action. And look for more actions similar to this as things roll on, because there is a big crackdown on illegal immigration, however you want to put it. We'll see exactly how it plays out. Let's go to the number 3 story of this week. It gets a jump in response of 25.83% from the number 4. Marcus Mariota throws first career postseason touchdown to himself after deflection. Now, I will give you a bit of a spoiler alert. The NFL playoffs do dominate the top 3. They don't take it over completely, but they do pretty much beat it up. And this is the first one into that. There were 4 wild card playoff games this last Saturday, and 3 of the stories were very high ranking. This one is one of the highest rankings that are here. Marcus Mariota of the Tennessee Titans, who got a chance to play in his first playoff games after dealing with some injuries, dealing with some issues and just regular season stuff. The Titans made it to the playoffs and had an amazing game where one of the oddest plays ever, in fact, the second time it's ever happened where a quarterback has thrown a touchdown reception to himself. This is the first time it happened in a playoff game where eventually Marcus Mariota tossed the ball into the end zone. It was deflected by someone there. Instead of just grabbing it for interception or batting it straight down, they just kind of tipped it back. Mariota was in the area where he could catch it and close enough to run it into a touchdown, 6-yard touchdown, I believe. It was the first touchdown he's ever had in the postseason, and, of course, Titans end up winning that game and going on to the next round. The number 2 story this week, Dianne Feinstein releases transcript of Fusion GBS meeting regarding anti-Trump dossier. This gets a jump response of 12.58% from the other story. The last story we had, Marcus Mariota. Now, what does this mean? If you've been paying attention to what's going on in Washington and actually paying attention, not just listening to all the Trump talk, you know that there's been some meetings and some hearings going on about the Russian dossier, the dossier that sort of sparked the look into collusion thoughts of the Trump campaign with the Russians. A group that actually put together this or hired a person to put it together is called Fusion GPS, and they get mixed up with doing some things directly for the Republicans and the Democrats as well. The executive of that group gave a testimony basically saying that everything that the guy they hired, the British agent they hired, is on the up and up. They didn't do it for anything political. And the fact the agent went to the FBI on his own while doing political research because there's so many things in there that just seemed a little off. And Dianne Feinstein thought that she was forced, her hand was pushed to get this information out to the public. Fusion GPS actually wanted to publicize as well, that she leaked the transcript to everyone to see, literally the world to see. So we got a chance to see what exactly was said on British intelligence officer Christopher Steele, or ex-officer, I should say, and what Glenn Simpson, the Fusion GPS CEO, said on the stand before the Senate committee. Now, the number one story for this week, as we said, football dominated. So it's another football story dealing with the NFL, dealing with the playoffs, although the story we put is on the losing end instead of the winning end. This one, loss to Jaguars, should end Tyrod Taylor's era for Bills. The Buffalo Bills and the Jacksonville Jaguars faced off against each other, two teams that are just kind of historically not great. Not necessarily bad, but not really all that good either. Now, the quarterback situation is part of the problem. Tyrod Taylor quarterbacks for the Bills, and he has been with and without the Bills a couple times as they've had their own larger issues to deal with. But he's a serviceable quarterback, and he was playing for the Bills this weekend. Also, the Jaguars have a guy named Blake Bortles, who was a very highly anticipated draft pick and has been more or less mid-level for the Jaguars, who have been more or less mid-level for their lifetime as a franchise. Because the Jaguars are able to beat out the Bills believe they are going to move on from Tyrod Taylor, their quarterback. Again, Jaguars move ahead into the playoffs to play again this weekend, sometime today, as you're probably listening to this on a Saturday. And those are the stories. Oh, by the way, 34.71% jump from the number 2 story on Dianne Feinstein. It is a 131.31, that's weird, 131.31% jump from the number 10 story. That's the HMM black hoodie debacle with that one. And from the almost irrelevant story, the 116 story, in response to you reacted to that one 3,700 times more than the other story, which we'll get to in quite a bit. But that is the top 10 stories for this week. As we said, you want to get in the voting, you vote with your fingers, you vote with your clickers, you vote via how you respond to the stories you put down on social media. Follow us on Facebook and make sure you set us to be in your feed. Facebook's doing some changes. We'll talk about that. I'm sure that will make us maybe not as relevant. Make sure we're relevant. Make sure we're main messages in your feed. Look for This Is a Conversation. The blue conversation bubble will be there as the image. For Twitter, you go to th_conversation, twitter.com/th_conversation, and follow us there, like us there. Love the stories, like the stories, heart the stories, share the stories, comment the stories, hate the stories. Whatever you do to respond to the stories gets counted in as an interaction. And the more interactions that we get, basically pure interactions, the more you get into the top 10, or they do that, as I should be saying, or something like that. Something like a great interview we're hoping is coming up in just a bit. We'll talk to my friend Kevin Miller about radio in Little Rock, Arkansas. We'll probably ask him about his old Hall & Notes doppelganger time. Well, that's going to be pretty funny, I hope. And he will play the brackets, see what he thinks about news. Our man who talks news all morning, 5 days a week. We'll see which big story he wants to talk about in the brackets. Coming up for This Is Conversation's weekly wrap-up show for the week ending January the 13th, 2018. Now, if you heard what the top 10 stories are for this week, you may not agree specifically with the order that came in, and you don't get a chance to have the full say because this is the millions and millions and literally billions of people around the world who have access to the internet who essentially get a chance to vote on this. So you probably got outvoted, outshouted out in what you thought was a top story of the week. We give you the chance to tell us what you think is the biggest story. And, by the way, give you a little gift in the process. You get a chance to play the rankings game. You can do it right now. It is online with the top 10 stories from this week, where you can take them from the 1 to 10 order that they came down in on the podcast, and you can rank them however you want them. You tell us which story you think is really the top and which story you think is the bottom. Now, you only get to choose between 1 and 10, so you can't sneak in any dead porn star stories, which we'll get to in a bit. But you can get a chance to say what you think is the more important story. Your chance to sort of play the brackets and get a gift for it as well. It's simple. Go to thisistheconversation.com/rankings. Thisistheconversation.com/rankings. Every week we allow you to shift the stories around in your order the way you want to, and one lucky person gets a great gift. A $10 Starbucks gift card is what's on the line coming up for this week. So check it out. Go to thisistheconversation.com/rankings and play the rankings game. Kevin Miller does double duty for radio here in Little Rock. He literally sits across the glass in the mornings as I'm doing my morning production in my studio for my stations, as he does First News with Kevin Miller for the drive time. And then in the evenings, he comes back and does radio, or Top 40 radio, for Alice 107.7, something he's been doing for quite some time, and he's really good at it. And the most important thing is he's a really good friend of mine. He stepped in to help me out with the brackets this week so I can make sure I'm starting my whole 50 weeks of guest things here. And to be honest, I didn't take time to really call a guest. So he stepped in and took over and is doing a great job of helping me flesh this thing out. So basically, we just had a nice, good conversation and played some news games. And we opened up just talking about the main difference between doing the young stuff for the kids and the music and the older stuff for the adults and the news.
Well, life is life, and news is relative. And so it's about knowledge, and it can be about knowledge in any number of different fields. And I think one will give to the other. Now, you've got very news-heavy diets where it's harder stories and sometimes tougher stories and more intense stories and things where you've got to get to the facts and the information. On the other side of it, some of the information can still be played there, too, or works well to keep you informed with what's going on, not only in the news, but in life. We all live lives. And as a news person, I think you have to know what's going on, the specifics of stories, but the passive listener may or may not know that information. So with life, you've also got to share things that are, I don't know, I guess you got to kind of you can't be so focused on one, you have to ignore the other. So somewhere there's a balance. Am I making sense? I hope I am.
You're making perfect sense.
I hope I am.
Now, here's where I guess it gets kind of the kicker question on it. You, of course, are still doing rock and roll, if you can call it that. You're doing
it's
top 40s,
it's pop, it's hit radio.
Top 40 radio.
It is. Yeah.
And you're doing news, and you have an older demographic for news that you want to get younger with, and you are an older demographic talking to younger people with the music. How do you balance that in your head and able to talk to the two audiences?
I don't know how to explain that. I just try to target whatever we're working with in the moment. If it's a news story, who is interested in this? And I'm trying to think it through from a listener perspective. It's not about me. I'm trying to think about it, as idealistic as it may sound. What's it going to be like for the person on the other side of the microphone? What are they listening to? And when I'm interviewing somebody, I'm trying to think of the questions, and hopefully most of the time, I'm sure I'm not all the time, but hopefully most of the time successful in asking the things that they want to know. What would they ask? What are things that are interesting about this? And sometimes it depends on the interview. Some interviews are just simply facts. What happened? When? What do we need to know? What's the potential for something happening next? Other things, maybe there's a different layer to it, or maybe you can even get to that layer in the next interview where it may be a little bit more on the superficial side. It just depends on what it is. Same thing if you're doing pop radio or hit radio. What are people interested in? They're interested in having fun. They want to enjoy the music. And so the demo really doesn't come in mind to me as much as who I'm talking to in the moment, whether that's a male audience or a female audience or older or younger. I just try to express what I feel like they might like to hear or enjoy from their radio. I try to, I don't know if entertain is what I do. I just try to give them hopefully what they want at that time.
Now, we're doing this for my podcast. We're in the radio studio, so in the middle of the day where we're doing radio stuff. But the podcasting stuff, and there's, of course, big initiative for our upper level to do more of this type of thing. Do you see the on-demand stuff, the podcasting stuff, the stuff that's not hit the button for your music box at what this time as opposed to on-demand stuff? Do you see it as a real threat to what you do daily, or do you see it as something that actually complements what you're doing?
No, I think it's a compliment. I think that, okay, we don't know for sure. I mean, anybody can predict what they want to, where it's going to go. And we see new technology, and technology is moving so fast. What is current now is already outdated. It moves along that quickly. 4K TV, no, let's go 8K. The next thing is already out there. We're seeing that happen very quickly. So will there be something to listen to continually? Yes. Are there threats that are out there, either online or through streams? Absolutely. But the benefit that radio has over other medium is that if you have a radio station in your town, there's no one else that does. You are local to your community. As long as we continue as not only a group to remember that, but also as radio companies to remember the local is the thing that benefits us more than anything else, fine. There's always going to be a spot for that. Alexa can't give you your local information. I mean, she guys can find the local news stories or find some local stuff. But as far as what's, happening and live and having fun in your community, Alexa's not there to do that. She's a service. She's not a provider. And we are the providers of the content on a local level. And as long as we can do that, we should be fine. But yeah, there are options out there. I think podcasting is a great thing because it's just like this. If we sit down and have this conversation, if it happens once on the radio and it happens at 7:20 in the morning and you miss it, well, okay, I guess I just missed it. Well, now we've got the option to bring it back to people and let them hear it. And maybe there's something they like a whole lot more. It's like a best of tape that you can grab anytime you want. And I think that's very powerful also.
So now let's talk best of as in news stories for this week. It's time to play the brackets.
That was a nice
game.
segue. I like that. Huh? Yeah, that was good.
I've been doing this for a couple months. I'm getting a little better at it. So.
Okay, good.
So here's how the brackets work.
Okay.
We have the top 10 stories we just talked about in the first segment.
And this is like a tournament, right? We're working these out.
Exactly.
Okay.
So top 10 stories.
I'm Sweet 16. I'm NCAA.
But you have no idea. You can't pick Seton Hall because of their uniforms. You can't pick it till it comes up.
Okay.
We've got 10 stories. The first round, you get to eliminate one grouping in the stories to make it an even 8 or even 4.
All right.
So if you go through all 8 the first time, the last one gets eliminated. We're going to work on that explanation later.
Okay.
We're getting better on that. And then it go down to the last story, the final story, which you will pick as your top story of the week.
Okay.
And you can talk for about 5 minutes or so on that story.
Okay, no challenge.
But
throw me the ball. Let's see what happens.
And so this is from the listeners, from the internet folks. It's ranked by the responses, so I have no control on what happens.
Okay.
And as I told you yesterday, we probably won't get the dead porn star story. It didn't quite make the top 10 this week. Normally they're number 1, but that's
I'm just worried about whether I'm going to fall flat on my face. But we'll see
you'll do fine. Okay,
right.
This one's first grouping is the 10 story and the 5 story. The 10 story is H&M apologizes after coming under fire for the coolest monkey in the jungle hoodie modeled by the black child.
The Weeknd got upset about that,
Number 5 story is firefighters battle blaze at Trump Tower as smoke billows from top of skyscraper near presidential penthouse. Which story are we moving ahead?
Well,
or you can skip you can skip one grouping, but then you have to take everything past that.
I think that the H&M hoodie thing affected more people than the Trump Tower thing. The Trump Tower thing, it was a fire in a air conditioning unit. It turned out to not be a big deal. So
we'll keep going. Right. Okay. Number 6. Number 4 story, immigration agents raid 7-Eleven stores nationwide, arresting 21 people in the crackdown, the biggest in Trump era. Or Ohio Republican Treasurer Josh Mandel dropping his Senate bid, citing his wife's health issues.
Wow. That's a tough matchup. We may have to go into overtime on that one. Both have strong implications. I'm going to go with the Ohio Senate thing, and the reason I'm going to go that way is because we don't really have a 7-Eleven presence here in Arkansas. Now, if we had one in our state, I would probably say 7-Eleven is the way to go. However, that Ohio Senate bid is a total, that has some national weight to it, so I'll go with that.
All right, next, the number 2 and number 3 story. Number 2 is Dianne Feinstein releases transcript of Fusion GPS meeting to anti-Trump dossier. And number 3, Marcus Mariota throws first career postseason touchdown to himself after deflection.
Oh, there's no question that Dianne Feinstein releasing that.
You're not going sports in this one.
Well, not for that. That was a cute play. It'll end up on the blooper reel somewhere, but it's not. It's not going to. The release of that information is something that's ongoing. So.
Okay, the next 2, and of course you can skip this one and go to the next one if you want to. The next 2 are both football. First one is college football playoff, Alabama over Georgia in the overtime victory.
Yeah.
Second one is the Jags win over the Bills, but the story headline went with was the Bills finally get rid of Tyrod Taylor for good instead of maybe bringing them back again. Or you can skip to the next two. Your choice.
I'll go with the Alabama-Georgia game. I mean,
All right.
I think you've got to go with Alabama there. I think that's a big deal for us here in Arkansas because you've got two SEC teams that were in the national championship game. The SEC couldn't lose in that. That was the great thing. Georgia had a solid run. Nick Saban made a huge change there at halftime, and he pulled out Jalen Hurts and went with a kid at quarterback, true freshman, whose name I still can't pronounce that guy's name.
Right.
But, maybe Tao, is that how you say it? Or,
Yes. That was a 9, and the one, by the way, the college football playoffs was a 9 story. The one story was, oddly enough, the Bills getting rid of Tyrod Taylor.
Well,
and the two stories we're not going with this week is the 8 and the 7. That is water leak in the baggage claim area at JFK Airport.
Yeah.
That caused some issues. And Dennis Kucinich, sticking with Ohio, he is running for governor with the 5 other people running for governor.
Okay.
So those two stories are out of the mix.
Yeah.
So we're moving ahead between this time story number 10, which is HMM hoodie controversy, and story number 6, and that is the Ohio Republican treasurer not running for Senate.
I think the Ohio Senate story is still the bigger of the two. And the HM thing, the weekend, he got upset about it, pulled his endorsement from it. But we've seen that kind of thing before. In fact, there was something that popped up on the Walmart website not too terribly long ago that was disparaging to people that were in the media. And Walmart got in trouble with that. And that, when was the last time anybody mentioned that since it happened? Okay. And I don't know why these retailers do that stuff. They'll sell stuff, I suppose, I guess. But the controversy, you'll see these things happen again. That political thing is something that's maybe a little bit longer lasting.
Okay, so now we go between the 2 story and the 9, which is Dianne Feinstein and the Fusion GPS dossier and the college football playoff.
Well, you don't make this easy, do you?
No. It's the people. These are the stories they
is that
care
what
about.
it is?
The
okay.
dead porn star didn't make it this week, so there you go.
I wish she had. Man. Is there an
and remember,
overtime?
you're going to choose between this story and the Ohio one as
since
well.
I'm choosing, I will have to go with the SEC. That the Fusion story is still huge. I mean, that can't be discounted. Why did Feinstein reveal that information? There's so many things that are still unknown about that as far as the ins and outs of it. I'm still waiting for more facts, I think, on that whole deal. I mean, I know what I know about it, but I still don't think I can speak on it with the great knowledge I could with SEC football. Is that awful or what?
So that means you're choosing betwing Ohio politics.
I'm totally doing it for myself.
SEC football.
Yeah, this is self-purposes. There's no question about it. There are so many things that have happened in the news this week, and that was very powerful, though. But you've got Alabama now that's won 5 national championships in 9 runs. And how many total have they gotten?
They went to us on a number that last
9 years, 5 championships in 9 years.
And 9 in the last 12 are SEC on top of that.
Okay, yeah,
something like that.
Well, I mean, like I say, you got to look at Nick Saban as the coach, and as arrogant as he can be, and as much as he frustrates me, he's the guy to beat. There's no question. You got to worry or wonder about what's going on with Gus Malzahn down at Auburn. Going, hey, I remember I beat both of those guys. But Georgia has a program that is young. It's upcoming. I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think Alabama may have their hands full in that. Cannot recall off the top of my head the name of the Georgia head coach, but has the
Kirby
Alabama.
Smart.
Yeah, Kirby Smart has the tie with Alabama. There's nobody that wants to beat Nick Saban more, so that could be interesting.
Kirby Smart is the only one of the Saban disciples who ever actually beat him.
Yeah. It's interesting to see where that's going to go. With that said, again, you can't discount what has happened in Washington too with the release of that information. How does that play into the Russia investigation with Bob Mueller and what's happening there? What's happening with the House and Senate investigations? Will that play into it? Donald Trump obviously was not happy about that at all. He tweeted about it this week, so it's hard to ignore that story too. Before I start. I've got more questions of curiosity. This is one of those. This goes back to what we started with. I mean, if we started an interview, I don't have the answers. So these are questions that I would ask somebody that was interested in that information. So what do we know? Where did it come from? What about, there's so many different layers to that story. And when you get a story like that, it can get confusing real quick. And, those are both very tough. I took the easy route. I went SEC champion or national championship.
So that's your
or SEC
story.
Championship twice. Whatever. So.
All right. So this is the part where most times I have people who are promoting things, podcasts, whatever. So they do that. So go ahead and promote yourself. Where could somebody, if they're listening and they wanted to find you, how would they find you? What would they be looking for?
Just on the street. Look for the guy that is the coolest guy in town. I mean, he's got the style, the swagger. You can listen to me mornings on News Radio 102.9 KARN. I'm on from 6 till 9 o'clock every Monday through Friday. And we try to have the whole idea is to get the information you need every day, whether it's traffic and weather. We do that every 10 minutes, news every 15. But also, too, if there's something that's happening and topical, we want to try to be talking about the people as that goes along, whether that's one of our reporters talking about what's happening in Washington and the latest information there. It may be we had somebody on, we heard about in Little Rock the Indulgences Day Spa situation that closed down, and we had somebody on talking about what recourse do you have if you were affected by that, and or another business, a brick-and-mortar store that shuts down and you're left holding either a certificate or a gift card. So advice with that. We try to have some fun and a good time, too, along the way also. And anytime there's something that happens immediately, we want to share the news. And we mentioned there, the Trump Tower fire. That was one of the breaking news stories we had that, it turned out to be nothing. But, at the moment, you didn't know. So we're just trying to, keep people updated. We had some ice and snow this week, and it didn't turn. Winter just barely missed us. But, again, you can turn to us for the information you need. And then in the afternoon, I get to have a good time. It's like doing one of my favorite things. I get to jump on Alice 107.7 and take people home in the afternoon. So it's a great thing. And I don't want to say it's work on KARN, but it's a different type of radio than I've ever done. And it's very mental and it's very intense. The other side of it, I can let the other part, I can loosen my tie a little bit and have a good time on Alice. So that's what I do. That's when you can listen. So.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for helping out with my project. Thank you so much for stepping in.
Glad to do it, and I appreciate I'm honored that you would even consider me to be here. So thanks so much.
This week, we're once again spotlighting coffee for less, and you can get coffee for less just by going to our website, thisisaconversation.com/coffee for less. That's the link for our Coffee for Less discount, or just go to the sponsors page and find many sponsors there. But we're putting a spotlight this week again on Coffee for Less as we are still getting fresh into the brand new year, and new brew may be what's on the case. As I told you last week, I've been doing nothing but tea, and I've gotten my tea from Coffee for Less. So it's even easier, more convenient than going to the store because they send it right to you, and the prices cannot be beat. And for folks who are still doing the old coffee thing, coffee's old news these days. It's all about tea in my world. But if you're still living with coffee and you can get it any way you want to, you can get the beans to grind yourself, you can get the Courage cups to do the quick cups, or you can do regular old brew just like normal. And you can get your favorite flavors, your favorite brands, all the great stuff sent straight to your office, to your home, to your nook, to wherever you want them to go. Also get things like teas, get things like chais, get things like hot chocolates, special things like that for the best prices around. It's not quite free, but it's definitely for less and convenience you just can't pay any more for because they won't let you. It's discounted. Coffee for Less will give you all you need and more, so check them out by going to thisisconversation.com/coffee for less and let us know how well they're treating you so we can let them know how to keep coming up with us so we can keep working together with Coffee for Less. Once again, sending thanks to my good friend Kevin Miller from Alice 107.7 in Little Rock and KARN News Radio, or 102.9 News Radio KARN. That's official name in Little Rock. He works in the cluster I do here, and we literally look at each other and make faces across the glass as the studios we work on connect to each other in the mornings. And great to have him around. And hopefully you had to enjoy the interview and the time with Kevin. And if you want to help us out by filling out people to fill out the brackets, including yourself, you want to promote yourself, I'm down with that. Just go to the website, thisistheconversation.com, and connect with me so we can get you on to play the brackets. Now, in the time we have allotted, or about 6-7 minutes or so, we're going to get through as many stories as we can, starting off with the rounding off of the top 15 and the almost irrelevant story for the week. Almost irrelevant for this week happens to be our number 116th ranked story, and that is what just came out this morning. Facebook's changing their news feed, and that could be an issue for all of us. So you've already probably seen my panicked expression inside of some of my news feeds and some of my projects. But essentially, they're making it so that what your actual friends do in your feed is actually what you're seeing the most of. So, who would have thunk that? However, what it means, it's shrinking eyeballs for businesses and things that don't get a lot of love, spammy type things. So if you're not interacting with it, then you're probably not going to see it. This is why if you follow us on Facebook, as Facebook is your main way to see what's going on with This is a Conversation, make sure you are interacting with this post on Facebook so that we can keep it stay in your feed. Simple. Look for This is a Conversation on Facebook, and there's a blue speech bubble icon there, or on Twitter it's just th_conversation. Now, rounding out the top 15 this week, let's go with starting off with number 11. MoneyGram signs a deal to work with currency startup Ripple. That means MoneyGram is getting into the cryptocurrency deal as well. Also, pardoned former Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio is announcing he's going to run for the sheriff in the Senate, in that state, and he still says that Barack Obama's birth certificate is fake. So if that's what you want to go with, that's where you're going with. Cliven Bundy's case was dismissed by a federal judge with prejudice, which means it's probably all done. Cliven Bundy was a weird kind of story where he took over the federal land. He took over basically what was essentially a rest area in the middle of nowhere for people to kind of commiserate there, and took it over and just claimed it as his on whatever grounds he wanted to. This case was dismissed. We hope this thing is over, but we'll see how that rolls along. Number 14 for this week is the story on Tom Styler buying a copy of Fire and Fury for every member of Congress over the week. Fire and Fury, I should say, is the book by Michael Wolff. While some people say it's mostly trash, and many people say it's not very well put together, and of course the ethics of getting the idea and information not quite on the up and up. Most people still was a barn burner of a book and basically had America reading again over the weekend. This was something done by billionaire environmentalist Tom Steyer, who, of course, has been buying many, many, many commercials on TV saying that Trump's not good enough to be our president. He actually bought a copy of the book, which touts Trump as being a crazy person, among other things, for every member of Congress, at least one to count for a member of Congress. So because he's a billionaire, he bought a bunch of books to support the effort and maybe hand them out next time he's talking to people on Congress. And the number 15 story this week, as we said in a couple times today, and of course in the tease, adult film star Olivia Nova died this week at the age of 90. No cause of death at the time that I have from this story and anything that's popped up. But we will talk a bit extended on the adult film stars who have died recently. We've had many of them die, and essentially every other week has been one of just a randomness for the most part, mostly of just kind of unknown causes. We did have one incident where one woman died because of suicide after being essentially gay bashed for not wanting to do a scene with men who just got finished doing homosexual gay porn. So she got freaked out by all the backlash she got on social media, and that was essentially a suicide. But I don't know what the trend is for adult film stars and them dying early these days, but that's something that's actually coming up as an issue in the industry. So they're doing their best to make sure that the ladies and the guys, I guess, are taken care of for at least their mental and physical basic well-being, because just people dying of natural causes usually tends to come some other cause in cases. And so many of these can't be a complete coincidence. They have to be not so much some sort of conspiracy related, but there's usually something else around there. Now, in the time we have allotted, we are going to get through as many of the stories that also ran between 15 and 1:16 today. So before we get out of here, make sure we get the time in. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. And if you want to get in contact with us, go to our website, thisistheconversation.com. Follow us on Facebook at This Is The Conversation and on Twitter at @th_conversation. Remember, you follow us and interact with the stories. Number one, we stay in your feed for Facebook. Number two, that's how you get votes in for the podcast every week. So without further ado, let's go on ahead with what we have left over. This story is story is one that may mean something to you if you have younger ones in the home. The launch of Overwatch League is a crucial test to whether video games can join the NFL and NBA as franchise spectator sports. E-games are a big thing and a big moneymaker, but mostly a big moneymaker for people playing them online. The act of actually sitting and watching a game, while it's a big thing to do overseas and in Asia and Europe, here in the States, people really want to watch real live people get sweaty and bump into each other instead of their pixel avatars do it at the moment. Overwatch is a very popular game, and a lot of people like to watch it played, so there's hoping that the Overwatch League will bring in more people willing to sit and watch other people have the fun of playing video games. Here's a story about Alex Trebek, who this is not the story of him saying that the guy who said Gangster's Paradise was not the right clue for Gangsta's Paradise. Gangsta's Paradise Lost, to be exact. He is, being Alex Trebek, is having brain surgery. He had a fall. He has to deal with some issues, and he's going to be back soon. He hopes to get back into the studio. And one last one. Kansas Republican lawmaker says black people abuse marijuana because of their character makeup and genetics. And because of that, this Kansas Republican lawmaker had to back away from what he's got going on. And while President Trump's comments over countries like African countries and Haiti being what they are and preferring to have Norwegians come to the United States, that did happen. We are completely out of time for today. Thank you so much for joining us for the show. Join us again next week for more great conversations that we have with you from This is the Conversations weekly wrap-up show.